"Fly this helicopter and I'll marry you," CEO mocked the janitor. But his real secret left her speechless. This is the story of a powerful CEO who humiliated her janitor in front of everyone, never realizing the man she was mocking had a hidden past that could turn her entire world upside down. Stay with us till the end. You won't believe the shocking twist that left her completely speechless. Rebecca Hayes stepped onto the gleaming tarmac of Skyfleet Aviation's private airfield, her heels clicking like a metronome of authority. The evening sun cast a golden glow over the sleek hangars and polished aircraft lined up like trophies of her empire. Investors from across the country had gathered, eager to see the latest innovation her company promised to deliver. Rebecca thrived in this world of wealth, power, and precision. Her tailored suit, her diamond necklace, her commanding presence, everything about her screamed control. She looked around and saw nothing but opportunities to flaunt her dominance and outshine her rivals. Near the edge of the hangar, a man pushed a mop bucket across the concrete. Ethan Miller, the janitor, kept his head down, moving with quiet purpose. His work shirt was faded, his boots scuffed, his hands calloused. He never sought attention, and for most of the staff, he was invisible. Yet, his eyes occasionally flicked toward the aircraft lined up for display, lingering with a strange familiarity, as though he understood them on a level no one expected from a janitor. Rebecca noticed his gaze and felt a spark of superiority rise in her chest. A man like him, she thought, could never dream of standing where she stood. As the investors clustered around her, admiring the newest luxury helicopter parked on display, Rebecca's lips curled into a smirk. She saw Ethan pausing to look at the machine, and the moment was too tempting. "Hey, Miller!" she called out sharply, making sure everyone could hear. Ethan looked up calmly, his eyes meeting hers without flinching. Rebecca gestured toward the gleaming aircraft and said with mocking grandeur, "Fly this helicopter and I'll marry you." The words sent a ripple of laughter through the crowd. Some chuckled awkwardly, others laughed outright, their eyes darting between the glamorous CEO and the quiet janitor. It was a performance, and Rebecca basked in it. She had turned the man into a joke, a punchline to entertain her audience. But Ethan didn't react the way she expected. He didn't shrink, didn't flush with embarrassment, didn't stumble for words. Instead, he simply gave a small, knowing smile and returned to his work, as though her mockery hadn't touched him at all. That smile unsettled her, though she quickly masked it with more bravado. For the investors, it was entertainment. For Ethan, it was just another day of silence. Standing slightly behind Rebecca was Chloe Adams, her personal assistant. Chloe had been with her long enough to witness her ruthless side, but something about this moment made her uneasy. Watching the crowd laugh at Ethan while he quietly endured the humiliation stirred a discomfort she couldn't shake. There was dignity in his silence, and Chloe's eyes followed him as he walked away, mop in hand, leaving behind the echo of Rebecca's cruelty. The tension of the moment was seized by Daniel Brooks, Rebecca's biggest rival in the aviation industry. Slick, charming, and always ready to undermine her, Daniel raised his voice just enough for the investors to hear. "Rebecca, you've got quite a sense of humor. Though I must admit, maybe your janitor does have a better chance of flying that helicopter than your company has of matching my latest model." His words drew a few nervous laughs, and some of the investors shifted uncomfortably. Daniel had taken her joke and twisted it into a blade aimed at her credibility. Rebecca's jaw tightened. She prided herself on never showing weakness, but she knew Daniel was clever at exploiting any crack in her armor. The mockery she had thrown at Ethan had now turned into fuel for her rival. She tried to laugh it off, brushing Daniel aside with a dismissive wave, but the sting lingered. Around her, the investors murmured, and she caught a few glances directed not at her, but at the janitor who had walked away with calm composure. Rebecca believed she had put Ethan in his place, made him an example of where arrogance led when the unworthy dared to step into her world. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Ethan Miller was far from the man she imagined. Beneath the quiet uniform and the mop bucket was a history that would shatter her assumptions, a truth so powerful it would soon turn her world upside down. Ethan returned to his quiet duties after the humiliating incident, pushing his mop across the hangar floor as if nothing had happened. But while he seemed invisible to most, small details began to slip through the cracks of his disguise. Every now and then, as technicians struggled with equipment, Ethan would pause, glance at their work, and offer a calm suggestion. At first, no one paid him much attention, but those who bothered to follow his advice were shocked to discover he was right every single time. A misplaced cable here, a faulty sensor there, Ethan's sharp eyes caught details that even trained staff overlooked. And when the opportunity arose, he didn't hesitate to pick up a tool and correct the issue himself, his hands moving with confidence that didn't belong to a man of his supposed station. Chloe noticed it first. She had always been observant, used to reading between Rebecca's sharp words and Daniel's sly smirks, but Ethan was different. One afternoon, she watched as he calmly rewired a control panel on a supply cart, doing in minutes what the maintenance crew had scheduled an hour to fix. He didn't brag, didn't ask for recognition. He simply returned to his mop afterward as though nothing had happened. Chloe frowned, her curiosity stirring. A janitor wasn't supposed to know the inner workings of aviation machinery, let alone handle it with such ease. Meanwhile, Rebecca's world was becoming more pressured. Investors were restless, their ears constantly tuned to Daniel Brooks, who was working tirelessly to chip away at her confidence. With every boast of his company's sleek designs and flawless test flights, Rebecca felt her grip on the crowd loosening. Daniel knew how to strike where it hurt, and he played the room like a violin. Innovation, he told them with a polished smile, isn't about flashy hangars or bold promises, it's about results, and that's what my company delivers. Rebecca countered with practiced poise, but she could see the flicker of doubt in the investor's eyes. Tension escalated during a scheduled demonstration. The newest helicopter, Rebecca's prized display, was meant to wow the audience with a smooth presentation, but just as the investors gathered around, the machine sputtered. A warning light blinked across the dashboard, signaling a mechanical fault. Engineers were nowhere to be found, delayed by traffic on their way from another site. Panic rippled quietly through the staff, and Rebecca's chest tightened. Daniel's smirk widened as he muttered loud enough for others to hear. So much for Skyfleet's reliability. The silence that followed was broken by a steady, calm voice. Ethan stepped forward from the edge of the hangar, his mop leaning against the wall. He approached the helicopter without hesitation, his eyes scanning the panels with a practiced intensity. Kneeling by the engine housing, he pressed his ear close, listening, then reached for a toolkit left behind by one of the absent engineers. His hands moved quickly, each adjustment precise, as though he had rehearsed the steps 1,000 times. In less than 10 minutes, the blinking light stopped. The engine purred smoothly again, ready for flight. Gasps rose from the crowd. Investors exchanged surprised looks, whispering to one another. Chloe's eyes widened as she watched Ethan close the panel and wipe his hands on a rag, his expression calm, almost indifferent, as though what he had just done was routine. She felt a chill run through her. No janitor should have known how to diagnose and repair such a complex fault in minutes. Her curiosity deepened into suspicion. Ethan Miller was not who he seemed. Rebecca, however, brushed the incident aside. She clapped her hands sharply, forcing attention back to her as she declared, "Well, luck seems to be on our side today." She offered no thanks, no recognition, unwilling to admit that a man she had mocked might have just saved her from disaster. Pride blinded her, convincing her that Ethan's intervention had been nothing more than a stroke of fortune. She continued her presentation as though nothing unusual had happened, but the murmurs among the investors told a different story. Some leaned toward each other, whispering about the janitor's uncanny knowledge. One man muttered, "Did you see how quickly he handled that? Almost like he's been doing it for years." Another added, "Strange for a janitor to know more than the engineers." Their curiosity grew, and while Rebecca tried to drown out their doubts with polished words, Chloe's gaze remained fixed on Ethan. His calm demeanor, his silence, his precision, it all pointed to a past far greater than the mop in his hands. Daniel. Brooks, meanwhile, was seething. He had been waiting for this failure to cripple Rebecca's credibility, but Ethan had stolen the moment from him. What should have been Rebecca's public humiliation had turned into whispers of intrigue about a man Daniel hadn't even considered worth noticing. His smile faltered for the first time that evening as he watched Ethan walk back to his corner, mop in hand, like nothing extraordinary had happened. Daniel clenched his jaw. He wasn't about to let some janitor interfere with his plans to destroy Rebecca Hayes. What Rebecca dismissed as chance, others recognized as skill. And slowly, the balance in the room shifted. The investors who once laughed at the CEO's joke now looked at the janitor with quiet respect, their curiosity burning. Rebecca believed. She still controlled the narrative, but Ethan's silent brilliance had begun to unravel the story she thought she was writing. The man she had humiliated was no longer invisible. His hidden life was starting to shine through, and the more he tried to stay unnoticed, the more impossible it became. The murmurs among the investors grew louder after Ethan's quiet display of skill, and soon the whispers turned into a bold demand. One of the senior investors, a man known for his bluntness, stepped forward and said what everyone else was thinking. "Talk is cheap. If Skyfleet claims to be at the cutting edge of aviation, prove it. Let's see a live demonstration of this. Helicopter in action." The statement hit Rebecca like a cold wave. She forced a smile, but her heart raced. A live test flight wasn't part of the schedule, and her trusted pilot had been delayed due to another engagement. She tried to deflect, offering to arrange a private demonstration later, but the crowd wasn't satisfied. They wanted proof now, and Rebecca's credibility was crumbling under their impatient stares. Daniel Brooks seized the moment like a predator, catching the scent of fear. He stepped closer with that polished grin, his voice carrying just enough arrogance to sting. "What's wrong, Rebecca? Surely a company as innovative as yours doesn't need to hide behind excuses? Or is it that your machines are only good for display, not for actual flight?" The investors chuckled uneasily, some nodding in agreement. Rebecca's pride burned as she struggled for an answer, her empire balanced on the edge of humiliation. She glanced at her assistant, Chloe, who looked equally uneasy. For once, Rebecca's sharp confidence wavered, and Daniel's grin widened like a wolf closing in on its prey. Then, from the edge of the crowd, a calm voice broke the tension. Ethan Miller, the janitor, stepped forward with steady steps, his expression composed. He looked at the helicopter, then at the uneasy investors, and finally at Rebecca. "I can fly it," he said simply. The room fell silent for a beat, then erupted into laughter. The very idea of a janitor flying a state-of-the-art helicopter was absurd to most. Rebecca's shock quickly gave way to ridicule, and she raised her voice to remind everyone of the cruel joke she had made earlier. "Remember what I said?" she announced, her lips curling into a smirk. "If he can fly this helicopter, I'll marry him." Her words were meant to spark laughter, and indeed they did, at least at first. But Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't laugh, didn't bow his head in embarrassment. Instead, he gave a small nod and began walking toward the cockpit. The laughter faltered as he climbed into the pilot's seat with the ease of someone who belonged there. The investors exchanged puzzled glances. Chloe felt her breath catch in her throat as realization began to dawn. His posture, the way his hands glided over the controls, the calm focus in his eyes, it wasn't the clumsy bravado of a man trying to bluff. It was the practiced precision of someone who had done this countless times before. Rebecca crossed her arms, rolling her eyes, still convinced he was setting himself up for humiliation. Daniel smirked, waiting for the disaster that would surely ruin Rebecca's reputation once and for all. Then the engine roared to life. Ethan's hands moved with absolute confidence as he guided the helicopter into a smooth hover. The crowd's laughter was replaced by stunned silence. The aircraft lifted gracefully off the ground, steady and controlled. Not a hint of hesitation in his movements. Gasps echoed across the hangar as he tilted the helicopter into a flawless maneuver, banking left and right with the kind of ease that only years of training could provide. He wasn't just flying, he was performing. The silence broke into cheers as Ethan pushed the helicopter higher, executing precise turns that seemed effortless. He performed a controlled barrel roll, a maneuver so daring that even seasoned pilots hesitated to attempt it outside of military demonstrations. The investors stared, wide-eyed, as the janitor they had laughed at mere minutes ago showcased skills that no casual pilot could possibly possess. Chloe pressed a hand to her chest, her heart pounding as she pieced the puzzle together. His silence, his technical knowledge, his uncanny ability to diagnose mechanical faults, and now this. Ethan Miller wasn't a simple janitor. He was someone far greater, and she could feel the weight of the truth pressing closer. Ethan brought the helicopter into a smooth hover, holding it perfectly steady before guiding it back down. His landing was flawless, gentle as a feather. When the rotors slowed and the engine hummed into silence, the hangar erupted with applause. Investors clapped, some even whistled, their faces alive with excitement. They had come expecting to see Rebecca's latest machine prove its worth, and instead, they had witnessed something unforgettable. Daniel's smug grin had vanished, his face tight with frustration as he realized the moment he had hoped would destroy Rebecca had just turned into her salvation. Rebecca herself stood frozen, her lips parted in disbelief. The man she had mocked, the one she had turned into the butt of her cruel joke, had just stolen the spotlight in a way she could never have imagined. For the first time, her sharp tongue failed her. She had no words, no mockery to throw, no shield of arrogance to hide behind. Her earlier promise, meant as a joke, now hung in the air like a shadow. "Fly this helicopter and I'll marry you." The janitor had done just that, and he had done it better than any pilot she had ever seen. Chloe's eyes never left Ethan as he stepped out of the cockpit, his expression calm, unbothered by the storm of whispers and applause around him. He looked neither proud nor boastful, only composed, as though this moment was nothing unusual to him. But Chloe knew better. This was no ordinary man. Every piece of evidence screamed that Ethan's past held secrets powerful enough to change everything. She could feel the ground shifting beneath Rebecca's empire, and she knew the truth was about to surface. The hangar still buzzed with excitement after the demonstration, the sound of applause lingering like an echo that refused to fade. Investors crowded together, speaking in quick, eager tones, their eyes darting between the helicopter and the man who had flown it with such mastery. Rebecca stood stiffly, her arms crossed, her confidence cracked. She had mocked Ethan, dismissed him, turned him into a spectacle. But now the spotlight belonged solely to him. She couldn't stand the silence between them. Finally, she stepped forward, her voice sharp but trembling with unease. "Who are you really, Miller?" she demanded. "No janitor flies like that. What are you hiding?" Ethan looked at her, his gaze steady, calm, unflinching. For the first time, the mask he had worn, the quiet humility, the background role, slipped just enough for the truth to show. He didn't raise his voice or bask in the attention. He simply spoke with a quiet authority that carried more weight than any grand speech Rebecca could deliver. I was a helicopter pilot in the United States Air Force, he said evenly. Gasps rippled through the investors, their whispers rising instantly. I enlisted young, trained hard, and flew combat. Missions long before most people my age even had a driver's license. I was decorated with the Medal of Valor after pulling my crew out of a burning aircraft under enemy fire. For years, the skies were my second home. The room fell into stunned silence. Every eye locked on him. Ethan's calm voice carried stories of bravery without needing details. When I retired, he continued, I wanted peace. I had lived in a world of noise, danger, and medals that never healed the scars they came from. So I took a humble job, cleaning floors and fixing small things. I don't need status. I don't need power. What I value is humility and peace of mind. That's something too many people lose when they start chasing titles. His eyes flicked briefly toward Rebecca, the meaning clear. The investors erupted again, but this time with admiration. Their faces glowed with respect, their murmurs filled with words like integrity, strength, and honor. Several shook their heads in disbelief, marveling that a man they had ignored all evening carried a past so extraordinary. They began to rally not just behind Ethan's skills, but behind his character, impressed by his choice to live quietly despite his remarkable achievements. Some even muttered that they trusted a man like him far more than they trusted the arrogance they had seen in Rebecca. Rebecca's face flushed as she realized the tide had shifted. Her earlier mockery now painted her as shallow and cruel in the eyes of those whose approval she desperately needed. She had prided herself on her sharp wit and dominance, but in humiliating Ethan, she had revealed more about her own flaws than his. The arrogance that once gave her control now left her vulnerable, exposed for everyone to see. Daniel Brooks tried to claw back control, his voice rising with forced confidence. "Impressive story," he sneered. "But let's not forget, this is business, not a military parade. Flying tricks don't sell helicopters. Investors, don't let a janitor's war tales distract you from what really matters." But his attempt backfired. The investors turned on him with narrowed eyes, their patience with his smugness finally gone. One of them spoke bluntly. "At least he's proven himself. What have you proven, Daniel, besides trying to tear others down?" The dismissal cut deep, and Daniel's smirk vanished. His credibility collapsed under the weight of his own arrogance, leaving him stranded while Ethan's quiet dignity stole the spotlight. Rebecca's throat tightened as she looked at Ethan, who stood quietly among the storm he had stirred. For the first time in years, her pride cracked. She stepped closer, her voice softer now, stripped of arrogance. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly, each word heavy with sincerity. "I treated you with disrespect. I mocked you without knowing who you were. You didn't deserve that." Her eyes flickered with unease as the memory of her careless challenge echoed in her mind. "Fly this helicopter and I'll marry you." He had done it. Every investor had seen it. Her pride wanted to laugh it off, but her heart whispered that she had pushed too far. Ethan, however, offered her nothing but a polite smile. "I don't need an apology," he said gently, "and I don't need revenge. Respect is enough." His words struck deeper than any reprimand could, leaving Rebecca speechless. She had expected anger, perhaps even gloating, but instead he offered her something far harder to face: grace. Chloe, standing nearby, felt a wave of inspiration wash over her. She had watched the entire ordeal unfold, from Rebecca's careless cruelty to Ethan's quiet strength, and it changed something in her. She promised herself she would never dismiss anyone again, no matter their role or status. She understood. Now that worth wasn't written in titles or salaries, but in the unseen depths of a person's character. As the investors dispersed, their admiration for Ethan carrying far more weight than Rebecca's carefully crafted image, Rebecca lingered in silence. Her empire was still intact, but her perspective had shifted. She replayed every moment in her mind. The smirk she wore when she mocked him, the laughter of the crowd, the calm smile he gave in return, and the truth he revealed without a hint of arrogance. For the first time, she saw herself clearly. She had been chasing power, drowning in pride, and in doing so, she had lost the very thing Ethan embodied: humility. As the hangar lights dimmed and the evening drew to a close, Rebecca stood by the helicopter, her reflection mirrored faintly in its polished metal. She realized that true worth was never about status or power, but about hidden strength, humility, and the quiet dignity that could silence even the loudest of crowds. Those were the qualities she had mocked, and those were the qualities she now admired. Ethan had left her speechless, not with words, but with the undeniable truth of who he was.